Hey, what's going on? This is Reed, aka Carnivore Chef, and in today's video I just want to show you how to pick steaks. More often than not, I go to people's houses that don't work in a food industry or just don't eat meat very often, don't know how to pick steaks. They typically end up picking the toughest and weirdest cuts of steaks. They don't know what the steak is, or they don't know the quality of it. And I know this is going to be a huge difference between like US, Canada, UK, and just anywhere else. If you're interested in hearing about those as well, please leave me a like and comment down below. But with that being said, I'm in the US, and there are a few things that I look at personally when I go to look at a steak. All right, I'm just gonna start with the grades. And in the US, we have USDA grades, and then we have other things that are, I'm not sure if the USDA regulated or not, but we have them, and I've seen them plenty of times, and I use them at the restaurant I work at. And where I'll actually start is the beef that's not graded by the USDA, and that's typically called no roll. And honestly, I've gotten good luck with no roll cuts before. Like, we will get no roll like beef tenderloins from time to time, and you'll get 7 out of 8 of those will be choice or better, sometimes even prime cuts of tenderloin. I'm not sure why they don't get graded or why it's not regulated, but it is nice because it is a lot of value, especially if you get a case that's, has prime grade cuts in it that sell for, $22 a pound. But sometimes you also get burnt. Sometimes you'll cut into a loin and you'll just see nothing. It'll just be red, no fat, marbling whatsoever. That's just the gamble you take, but it's also a third of the cost on average from what I've seen. Here goes a no roll ribeye. It's, it's not great. There's not much in the way of marbling within the eye itself, and the cap's okay. The cap looks okay. It's not great either, but it's got a lot of fat. This could also be a no roll at this point. Like I said, it's kind of a gamble on what you're gonna get as far as quality. The next grade is USDA Select. And the thing that I've noticed about Select is that it looks pretty good typically, but the meat quality itself is very tough. Like, the protein strands in there are almost harder. I don't know exactly what causes this. I'm not a cattle farmer. I just know that I avoid Select because I already know it's not gonna be as good. Like I said, I've had some no roll that weren't good at all. Like, basically no marbling on anything, but at least with Select you'll get some marbling. It is very lean, typically. If that's the case, you might want to pick up Select pieces to get to grind up if you want that. That's a good choice to do with Select steaks, in my opinion. If you really want to eat it as a steak, you could always salt it. Just cover it in salt, let it sit overnight, wipe the excess salt off, and you actually end up with some pretty tender meat in doing this process. Next up is USDA Choice. This is my go-to typically because it feels like it's the best price per pound that you're going to get, because you get good marbling, you get good texture on the protein, and you get a good price. Compared to Prime, in my personal experience, the only thing better about Prime is that you get more fat in it, and that just means a little more flavor, but it's the same flavor you're getting in Choice. Like, this steak right here has plenty of marbling in it to cook through and help sear the steak, make it taste good. And obviously, Prime it looks beautiful. It's got great fat marbling all through it. The entire steak will be seared nicely just because it has fat rendering out of it the entire time, forming crust over the whole thing. And honestly, it tastes about the same. The biggest difference is that it's more tender because you have more fat marbling in between the protein to help break up the giant chunks of protein in between. So whenever you bite into it, you're more likely biting into fat and protein more often than just protein. All right, and then there is another one that I use at the restaurant a lot, is Certified Angus Beef. And typically Certified Angus Beef, or CAB, is choice or better is what I've been told based on the marketing for it. Oftentimes this is the case, but for whatever reason, sometimes I'll get a steak and it'll look amazing, but somehow the protein is kind of dry. I don't know how else to describe it. It can be dry sometimes, but that hasn't been every case. It's just been on occasion, and it's only been from a Certified Angus Beef brand. It's a good choice. It typically costs about the same as Choice, sometimes a little more. It just depends on where you find it. But anyways, up next, I want to talk about the type of steak. The first one I'm going to talk about is sirloin, because I use it the most to get my protein in if I want a steak, just because it's a much leaner cut, but at the same time you get a lot of steak qualities out of it than you would, like, say, a top round roast, which is very, very dense protein that is kind of chewy and hard to cook. So here's a good example of the one I get that has decent marbling. It's got a decent fat cap that on the outside of it, and typically what I do is I cut that all the way off, chop it up, and throw that into my pan to render some of the fat out so I can cook my steak in. I found this a much easier option on me. So these next two steaks are ones that I would personally get if I was like going to a barbecue or getting steaks for a bunch of people, or if I was trying to impress somebody. I'm sure most of you know this, but ribeye is a very flavorful steak. It feels like it's a good ratio of fat and lean. And honestly, it feels like one of those steaks that's kind of hard to mess up, just because it's so fatty. Like even an overcooked ribeye is still gonna be good, you know? So this is the main one I recommend for people to get if they're like going out, or if they're going to like a barbecue or dinner and they're asked to bring a steak or get steaks for people. Look for a good choice ribeye. The other one I recommend is a choice New York strip. And I've gotta say, it's almost on par with ribeye. And that's just because it's part of the rib section. The only thing that turns people off from the New York strip is typically there's a good cartilage piece that goes along the top where the fat cap is, and it can be a little tough and people won't like that. But if people understand what it is, they can either eat it or cut around it. It's actually a great cut of steak. But either way, I think you would be happy with either one of these steaks. All right, next is the filet mignon. The only issue I have with filet is that it's kind of bland. It's a very not used muscle, so there's not gonna be much beefy flavor in it. It's very tender though, so if you're trying to impress somebody with how tender your steak is, get a filet. Because even a select filet is still gonna be tender because it's a tenderloin. But I find more often than not that I'm just kind of like dissatisfied with eating a filet. I shouldn't have to wrap my steak in bacon to make it taste good, so I just kind of avoid this personally in general. But if it's something you like I said, select tenderloin is still gonna be tender. It's not gonna be as good or as tender as a choice or prime, but it's still gonna be good and tender. So no matter which steak you pick, just remember your goals and what you're getting it for. If you're like me, I'm trying to hit a higher protein, I typically just get sirloin just because it's easy, it's very high protein, fat's way easier to control in it, and it tastes good. It's a very beefy cut of steak. But if you're trying to feed people and you want people to be happy with what they're eating, you know, go run out and grab a choice sirloin or a choice strip, and you know, just cook it simply with salt and pepper, you know? Well, I hope this video helped you out, and if it did, please leave me a like at the bottom. If you're interested in seeing more videos like this, please leave a comment down below, and I will see y'all next time.